Hello everyone. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at this Ants airplane, de Havilland 82 Tiger Moth airplane. We're going to go through kind of how to get this thing in the air, how to get it all, started. Well, I guess we got to get it started before we get it up in the air, as well as some of the basics of navigation, sort of the other quirks of this plane. If you're curious as to where we are in the Isle of Wight, which is very interesting to me because my family's name comes from the center of this island. It's just kind of one of those neat little things where every once in a while I get an opportunity to come back like that. So let's get started. So first things first, though, when you climb into this thing, you immediately realize this is a product of a slightly different era. A couple different things. First of all, if you look at our squeaky wings and ailerons there, you can tell we're a biplane, a little old-fashioned. Looking at our little stick, there's not a lot of excitement there. You'll see it doesn't even have a radio button on here. We don't really have a flaps lever. What we have, I guess it would be a lever. Basically, this thing that unlocks the slats, which makes it possible for them to deploy to help us out a little bit when we get a little slow. Other things you're going to notice is we don't have an electronic system anywhere. We don't have an alternator. All of our instruments are basically conventional. And we have this thing, which is, oh my gosh, this Type P8 here. Makes navigation very difficult. And we'll go ahead and show that to you as well. The other thing we get, of course, is we get a lovely throttle, a little mixture handle. We get our little trim here. And when you look around, you're like, well, what? I don't even know where to start. What happens when I do this? It opens the door. I love the fact that the magneto switches are actually located outside here, and it's actually kind of important because when we go to crank the prop, which you have to do by hand, by the way, you'll see exactly what I mean. Now, it's worth saying before I get too carried away with getting this pretty cool airplane started is that it's a very customizable airplane. And one of the things they actually do is if you hold your mouse right here, there's a button that automatically starts the engine if you get stuck. The other thing you'll notice is if I hold my mouse over a lot of these instruments, you can actually change them. So, for example, if I wanted to put this in old school miles an hour, I could just click on it. Look at this, air miles per hour, air knots. I like this one because a knot makes sense to me for whatever reason. But you can change the altimeter style to a modern. You can put it in MB. And of course, you can sit here and you can adjust the angle of the tachometer. When I first got in here, the angle was at a pretty rakish angle, which is a little too much for me. You can also turn this on and off if you want. Totally up to how you'd like to go through it. The other thing they give you, of course, is they give you a GPS. And they also give you a little control tablet here. And the thing I love about the control tablet is everything's here. So when you open this sucker up, everything you could possibly need is all built into here. If you want to turn things on and off, you can turn the realism. Or you can crank this up really high if you want. It's completely up to you. Exterior preferences, you've got plenty of things in here. You can change the air intake on this thing. I mean, it's all here. The pitot cover, you can set all those things up. You can, again, make it a English or Australian style pitot tube. Of course, we have all the good engine stuff here. And they actually turn everything red that's not working correctly. We have persistent oil level. We have spark plugs we got to worry about. Man, this thing is, there's a lot of process here. And the good news is the way they set this up is they design it where if something doesn't look right, you can just click on it for the purpose of moving that sort of apart. I love the fact I can actually click on this to crank the propeller. If I stick my head out here like this, if I come down here and do one of those, you can actually see that I can pull the propeller from where I'm sitting. And that's so helpful because if you don't want to get out of the plane to do all the pre-flight stuff, you can just do it from back here. And that accessibility, I think, is really critical whenever you're going to do an airplane this old school and this authentic. Honestly, most of the fun of this plane is just get this thing started. So first things first, I'm going to go float my head down here to where my lovely tires are. I'm going to go ahead and gauge my parking brake, which is going to stick these little chocks underneath the wheels. Yeah, we don't have a parking brake. As a matter of fact, if you look very, very carefully, you'll notice we're missing another critical component here. We've got our regular brakes, and you can see something's missing. I'll let you use your imagination on that one. Another thing that makes this thing extra fun, other than this beautiful grass here, is when I float out back here, I feel like I'm hunting something here. You'll notice we have a tail skid. We don't even have a tail wheel, so it makes it very, very interesting on the ground. So let's get this thing going. I'll stop gushing about all those details and we'll run through. I love how you can just quick start it. I love how the chocks, the magnetos, and all this stuff. And there's a lot of different components. The first thing we have to do is prime the engine. And priming is a little weird in this plane. First things first, we need to make sure we have fuel. The fuel is turned on. The fuel, by the way, comes from here. That's this little box right here. And if you actually go up here into this one real fast, I crank my fuel all the way up. You'll notice this little needle here rises up. And the really, really wild part about this here is you've got the little valve, and you can see it just comes down on a little pipe that just right in here to the engine itself, which is, I don't know, I think that's cool. But what we have to do is we have to come all the way over here, and I've got these two little open pieces here for your cowling. And what you're going to notice is I can't click these right now. And the way they've engineered this plane, which I said is pretty creative, if I open up the checklist, you're telling this airplane I want to do things. And what it'll do is when you get to that particular component, it'll now let you do it. So if I'm doing a cold engine start, for example, if I come down here, it talks about the primer and stuff like that. You have the ability to actually actually click the individual components to open up the different parts that when you get to that particular section. Again, that completely depends on sort of what you're doing here. One of the things I like to do, though, is I just flip back here, and of course, you've got all your pitos and covers and stuff like that. I'm just going to go back to our exterior. Scroll down, luggage door, that's not the one. Venturi, English is fine. We have our wheel covers, propeller edge, left engine door. Here we go. I'm going to open that sucker up. We can also open up the engine cover, too, if you want to get really sophisticated. And when you do that, of course, it shows you this little tiny engine, and there's all sorts of fun little things inside of here. And I'm actually going to open up the checklist real quickly here. Grab my before starting engine, make sure that's all set. I did all that. We're going to sit here. Let's see here. Primer. There it is right there. Press the little look button, and you'll notice the head automatically snaps. And what you'll also notice, I can now click on things now that I've clicked that button. And the primer actually is this little guy right here. Now, the way this works is you push it 4 times or 5 times, and then you have to crank the propeller several times to actually get the fuel into it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 times. That'll work perfectly fine. I'm going to go fly right back to my seat here. And what you do now, of course, is I can go ahead and close that door. We're good in there. If we had bad spark plugs or something, we could go in there and I'll kind of clean it up. So let's go ahead and close that sucker as well. Head back over to my engine page here. So what I have to do now is pull my propeller a total of 4 times. 1, 2. See how my prime is priming? 3, 4. Now, I could have done that by coming up here and actually doing it. Now, this is the best part, and this is the fun part of getting this thing started. I think it's so cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to engage the 2 magnetos like that. The engine's fully primed. I'm going to make sure my brakes are set. I'm going to crack my throttle just a little bit here. So what you have to do is you pull the propeller, and then you pull it back. So we pull the propeller back just a little bit. See how we cranked it? And then we pull the propeller through. Okay, that's going to happen. Let's go ahead and clear everything here. I'll double check to make sure that works. We'll go ahead and pull that through. And again, if I want to jump back to the front of the plane to do all that, one of the things I love about this, before starting engine, we can go right over to here. I can actually go to propeller again. It just says pull clockwise. And you'll notice it pulls forward, full backwards, pilot calls contact. We pull to start, kind of a thing like that. And if you actually come back here, you can reset it. So I can actually pull the prop backwards, and then I can go ahead and pull the prop through. Part of the fun, as they say. Part of the fun, as they say. And what we do is we can basically run that through that component multiple times. And again, you can see everything is primed. We can see our fuel cut off. Everything's all pretty much ready to go. The throttle is closed. We can open that just a little bit. Notice it says set. It says open, kind of a thing like that. We'll go ahead and pull it back again. Yeah, man. Gotta love ancient engines. And there we go. After repriming, getting everything all squared away one more time, you can see that I got this sucker started. It was definitely fighting me a little bit. Now the engine's running. Go ahead and pop it down. It turns out the reason it was giving me so much trouble there had to do with the throttle. You really got to make sure that's set properly. Go ahead and flip on my other magneto now that I know that this is working, and we're good to go. So one of the downsides to this plane is they engineered it pretty carefully. One of the things you'll notice is when I was just chilling here, my spark plugs immediately started going down in condition, and you can see them slowly going up here. We also have to worry about things like oil level and all that other good stuff, but that's part of the fun. But this is all set as far as getting our lovely engine started. We're going to hold about 1,000 revolutions per minute. And basically what we're doing is we're waiting for oil to warm up. And one of the things it says, you basically got to give it about 4 minutes to warm up here. While it's warming up, of course, this is a great time to kind of take a look at some of the other things. Notice, by the way, we do have an autopilot hold in here, which is fantastic. We also have radios if we need them. And we have, of course, a couple other components. But for now, everything's looking pretty good. I'm actually just going to close that right now. So one of the odd features of this particular airplane, other than its lengthy warm-up time and slightly blurry gauges, is this really, really funky compass system we have here. Now, the way this works is not nearly as complicated as it looks. Basically, if I take my head and look down here, you'll notice that we have a conventional compass here, kind of almost like an old-school gyro compass, and you can see it's always heading towards north. Now, the reason this is valuable to us is if we go ahead and point our aircraft directly like this, you can see we're heading towards north ourselves with our little control, we can actually adjust this. One of the things you'll notice here is we're pointing roughly on a heading of 110. Now, people are sitting there going, well, that's, I guess that's helpful. What if I wanted to travel to the west, for example? You could. So what you would do is you basically grab this entire guy and basically you're adjusting the lever line, and you're going to adjust it until it goes ahead and points directly in the direction that you want to travel. I'll go ahead and move my head down so you can see it a little bit better here. We say we want it to head west, so I can go ahead and select that and make it aim towards west. Now, the way this works, of course, is we're going to have to go ahead and adjust it so that we can see it. So the cool thing here is when this is pointing and line itself up, as you can see right now, we're basically heading in that direction as well to make our lives a little bit simpler. You can see that we weren't heading east at all, but we were actually heading west because you're reading the other side of it. Like I said, tricky little instrument to use, but the key thing here is you got to always remember this thing always points towards north, which means if that N right here on our right is housing our little plus right here, that means whatever direction you're looking here is the direction you're traveling in. So you can see how that little east-west reversal is a little complicated. It's one of those kind of things. And as we fly around in the air, it gets a little bit simpler. But in this case, our takeoff heading today is going to be about 300. So I'm just going to give that a couple cranks. And you can see we are thoroughly off course here. And it's a very, very, like I said, confuzzling, but you can tell that we're kind of pointing a little off to that particular position here. Our desired heading is there, but you can see where we need to be. We're going to have to come to our right, basically to swing this entire big letter T here over so that we're actually heading in the correct direction. You will get that backwards about 1,000 times, so don't worry about that too much. So one of the things I'm noticing is my oil pressure is finally coming down a bit, which is kind of desirable here. I'll switch back to my regular one. Looking pretty good, and we're ready to get this thing taxiing. Now, this aircraft is not challenging to taxi. It's unlike a lot of tail draggers that I've flown over the years. This is not the biggest threat to taxiing kind of thing. One of the things I like to do is I stick my head out the window. I have a button here on my joystick that allows me to do it. You just go ahead and pull off the little parking brakes, not the parking brakes, the chocks there, which do remove them, of course. And I'm just going to give it a quick little tap of power. Again, it does not take much to get this thing rolling. If you have hard rolling friction on, it's definitely going to be a little more involved for you to get this thing going. And once we get rolling, all you like to do is pull the throttle out. Remember, you are dealing with a tail dragger, so visibility is going to be limited. And again, you want to keep that RPM over 900 if you can. You can see there's some nice modern airplanes there, our little hangars for our little club here, kind of chilling on the side. And what we're going to do is we're just going to slowly migrate here. What you would have done in the old days, of course, is we would have done S turns. So all I'm going to do is I'm pulling the stick back towards me, and we're just going to take a big letter S here. So we look that direction to kind of clear it. And as we're going to this side, what we do is we switch our head to the other side like this. Again, just looking where we're going. When we get close, all we do is we kick it over just like that. And we go ahead and look in the other direction. The key thing with all tail draggers is positive control. You got to be basically on your feet the entire time in order to safely get this thing in the air. So as you can see, it's a relatively straightforward situation. We're going to make our way continuously until we get all the way to the runway. All right, we're coming up on the runway, so really, really important to realize that the brakes on this thing are basically non-existent, so be very gentle. And of course, when you do stomp on them, don't hit them so hard that you whamp and basically do a face plant. So our plane's good. It's time to go ahead and do our good old-fashioned cigar here. Cigar, we're going to start with the controls. We're just going to run through, make sure everything's doing the good old wiggle there. Looks pretty good to me. We can actually do it from this view and kind of really do the dance here. So it's looking pretty good. So we're going to look at our instrumentation. We're going to double check to make sure our instrument type here, obviously we can change the type by just clicking on it. If you want to go more kind of conventional like that, you can actually hit it like that and do between millibars and whatever you'd like to do that way. Milliway is the instrument at the end of the universe. That's looking pretty good to me. I like that. Airspeed is looking pretty good here. There's slip indicators indicating a right slip. That's okay. This is a little complicated to read. The direction is the desired runway heading. We're good to go. We still have plenty of RPM. We're ready to give this thing a quick little run-up. Run-up's very, very simple in this plane. Like I said, there's no electronic systems. You can see I've already got the chocks in place there. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to kick the power up. They give you a pretty angry warning. I really don't want to be chilling at high power for any length of time, but basically we're just going to do a quick magneto check. That looks pretty good to me. And again, I can just reach out the window and you can just click, and you can see we just lost about 75. That's not terrible. We can go over here and we can very cautiously hit the left magneto. Again, I'm reading actually out the window to do this. Looks pretty good to me. Go ahead and kill that. I'm going to pull this all the way to idle. See if the engine cuts out. It's going to get very slow. Ooh, looks good to me. Pop back up to 1,000 revolutions per minute. Like I said, anything over 900, you won't have any issues with spark plugs. Give it a little tap of power. And we're on our way once more. Takeoff on this aircraft is completely conventional for a tail-dragging aircraft. Nothing surprising about it. I think the only weirdness is it's because this plane is so light. You'd be very, very surprised how little room you're going to require to get this thing in the air. It's just kind of one of those little details that kind of puts a smile on my face. This is an ultralight of its time, and you can see there they got a little aggressive with the brakes, and I'll probably stomp them too hard. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to line myself up. I'm looking out the window here. I've got plenty of room for this. Again, just be mindful of your power when you do this. And it looks pretty good right about there. Nice. I'm just going to hold the brakes gently. Give everybody one last wiggle here. Looks pretty good. Takeoff's going to be full power naturally. The big thing you have to remember is we have a limit to 2,100 RPM. Is anything past that, we could do for about 5 minutes safely. But the big thing is just kind of keeping an eye on your oil pressure and everything like that. So let's go ahead and get this started. I'm going to go ahead and pull the sticks gently towards me like this. I'm going to slowly apply power. It's not going to take much to get this thing going. Trust me when I say that. And we're just going to wait until the tail starts flying. You're going to need some pretty quick rudder action. Again, quick stabs of the rudder are all you require. You can see the plane wants to get flying. And that's it. We're airborne. Look at that. It takes absolutely nothing to get this thing in the air. Now, one of the things you got to remember is we're at a 10-degree incline right now. Level for this plane is actually right here. So one of the big mistakes people make is that because of the default head position in Flight Sim, you're actually basically hanging off the propeller. All right, you can see I've got about 22. That's some pretty good RPMs there. I can actually back this up to 21 right away, and then I don't have to worry about babysitting the engine at all. It's basically that simple. And we are airborne. So one of the things you notice here is we're starting to climb out here. So I'm going to keep a relatively gentle incline. Again, this is an air-cooled engine. You can see we're averaging about 60 knots, which isn't too bad here. 60 seems to be a good combination of climb as well as basically forward motion. I believe our cruise speed on this one is about 67 miles per hour, which is about this speed. So we are not what I would consider a high-performance aircraft by any means. So now that we're in the air, let's go ahead and start getting some of our ducks in a row, so to speak, here as we flip over the Isle of Wight. We'll go ahead and take a nice, easy right turn here. And what you'll notice is our little compass card there at the bottom is moving. And let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit so you can see. Well, it's our lever anyway. You'll notice here that when that line is perfectly parallel, let me go ahead and show you with my mouse. When this line is now parallel with this line, that means we're on the heading that we're looking down at. So you can see very clearly here that we are just slightly off course here, which isn't too bad. So what I can do is I can go ahead and bring ourselves in a nice gentle turn. And I can just wait until I get that nice and lined up. I can go ahead and bring out that nice gentle turn like that. And now that that line is now parallel and this is pointing back towards the end, that means we're on the course indicated on that little compass. It's kind of it's just different. It's not bad. It's not good. Like I said, it's just kind of different is the best way that I like to describe it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and level this plane out. Cruise RPM is 2100. So what I'm going to do is just kind of back it up a little bit. You can use a lower RPM. You get about a 2-hour endurance with this plane. Remember, our fuel tank is this thing. So it's not a ton of fuel there. So it's just kind of worth noticing. And one of the things I always struggle with is the fact that the compass rotates reverse there. So to get back on 300, I actually have to come to the left. And you can see that the big plus is pointing roughly in the direction of 9. And you can also clearly see that we're more or less parallel to that one component. Now, our attitude indicator in this aircraft is this guy right here. And one of the things I find interesting is it's almost too good. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying I just find it interesting just how incredibly responsive and fairly accurate this is. The other instrument, which is a little different here, is this guy right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go push my right foot forward, and you're going to observe that this needle tells us we need to now push my left foot. So this is the equivalent of the ball, and this is the equivalent of our rate gyro. One of the interesting things is as I tip here, you can see that we're about at 10 degrees there. Come over here, you can see we're about at 2, and it's responsive. Now, this is one of the few aircraft I can remember in recent memory that my muscle memory for rudders actually matches roughly what I expect. It's just kind of one of those things. So that works actually really, really well for us as well. So I like that. Now we get to enjoy kind of the peaceful countryside as we're kind of cruising around here. So we've got about 1,000 feet there. So I'm going to go ahead and push the nose over. No vertical speed indicator on this one. So it's just kind of one of those things you just have to kind of get used to. One of the things you got to remember is altimeters are not massively responsive. So as you start kind of pushing buttons and pulling handles here, you just got to kind of keep that in mind. I'm going to get it about as trimmed out as I can get it. Trim on this plane is easy peasy. So one of the things we have, of course, is we have a GPS. And one of the reasons that the GPS is really fun is you can actually come up here and switch to 3D vision mode. Watch this. And you can actually see like where you are, and it's like all conventional looking and everything like that. And you can see I've got a little bit of a climb going on here, which makes sense. I didn't trim it. But of course, you have yourself your little map here, and you can see we're just kind of cruising along here. You've got all the different towns, and the mainlands are right over yonder, kind of a thing like that. Again, keeping it pretty handy as far as this goes. You can put that away. But another thing I really like is if you actually bring up the tablet itself. I'll go level myself out here. If I go scooting through my pages a little bit, you'll notice in here that we have an autopilot. And one of the crazy things is I'm going to go ahead and press that. I'm going to go ahead and set altitude hold. You just click on it like that. And now, of course, if we want to, we can actually do a heading hold as well. So if I just want to go, boop, heading hold like that, we can then select the heading. And you can see my desired heading was a 2907. Remember, we were doing a 300 degrees a minute ago. And for those of you who have a joystick like I do, you can actually adjust that value directly. So if I want to follow a very specific heading, I can literally just come in here and dial that in, just kind of keeping an eye on my RPM. Now, one of the things that's a little funky about this plane is it's very difficult to do anything with the mixture in it. I'm actually going to reduce my volume just a little bit so I can hear a little better. And the reason for that, of course, is, you're basically doing it by roughness, and it's tough to hear and tough to feel. But if you did want to adjust the mixture, of course, and once we get up some altitude here, basically what you want to do is you want to pay attention to your RPM. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of open my view like this so you can kind of see both handles here. You'll notice that when I push the mixture forward, the RPM goes down. If I start pulling the mixture away, you can see my RPM starts climbing. And all I'm doing is I'm pulling the mixture back, and what's going to happen is the needle's going to keep going up, and you can see very clearly how my needle's climbing. It's going to keep going up. It's up. Did you see how it dropped? That means we went too far with the mixture. So now I'm just going to enrich it again until I see it drop again, and you can see it drop to about that point right there. So the reason that works so well is you can see we are now set correctly, with that nice lean mixture that's going to give us a little bit better range on this particular aircraft. And again, if you want to do some sightseeing, any of those things, you can. And one of the things I find really, really crazy is you can come in here, go over the map control like this. We'll go back to the main menu, direct to. Let's see here. Let's do E. I don't know why you'd try to fly this entire distance in this airplane, but there's nothing saying you can't do it. So we could activate that, open up our map kind of a thing. We can see right off our right there that if we want to go over to Heathrow, it's right there waiting for us. And of course, if we want it to be really, really, really goofy, we can come back over here, go over to the autopilot right here, IP, and of course, notice there's no nav hole. But that doesn't really affect us because once we have that GPS out, let me grab that one more time, it is going to provide us with the critical value that we need to turn to. And you can actually make it roughly work it out. If we go back to 3D vision here, of course, this would also be visible. And we can see we're a little off course here. But again, no problem as far as that goes because there's nothing stopping us from just coming in here and cranking on this thing, waiting for the aircraft to go ahead and turn. And then once we do start executing that turn, we can basically line ourselves up with everybody's favorite magenta line of safety to get us going all the way in that direction. And that's just to give you an idea of just how simple this plane is to fly. For those of you who are big fans of virtual reality like myself, this thing is such a treat. It is very, very easy to handle, like I said. Now, one of the things we're going to do in a moment here, now that we've got ourselves a little bit of altitude and got it going, I press the autopilot release. Notice there's no tone or warning or anything like that, which I appreciate because I don't know why there would be. We have no electronic system in here. And there is, like I said, built-in radios and stuff like that. For those of you who are trying, there's actually buttons that you have hidden. You can turn your co-pilot on and off if you want. There's one that'll even turn the windshield on and off, again, depending on what you're trying to achieve. I like to say they thought of that is kind of one of those little kind of ideas that kind of comes with it. But one of the things I really love about this plane is it's far more maneuverable than anything I'm typically used to flying. And I love stuff like this. And just to give you an idea of how stupid maneuverable this thing is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself a little bit of altitude here. And I'm going to pull this aircraft into a really, really gentle stall. As you can see here, we're not going very fast. We're doing about, 40 knots, a little less. And when it departs, it just sort of, let's see if I can get it to, there it goes, whee. And that's all it does. And there's some other dumb things you can do with it too. So I'll pull my power back just a little bit. I'll bring it back to about 1600 RPM, hold that nose up. And you can actually do one of these things where you just kind of let it drift. And then you push this one and you let it drift this way. And then you let it drift this way. And then you just kind of get it going in sort of this little whoa kind of a thing. Almost just like kind of like a semi-falling leaf kind of thing. You can do opposite controls just like that. And it's just, the rudder is just so powerful on this thing that you can just go. And of course, if you're more of an aerobatics person, getting this thing into all sorts of nasty snap rolls and stuff like that, generally not recommended, but the performance on this thing is incredible. I'll build up a little bit of speed here real quickly here. If I wanted to go ahead and pull myself over here and just give it a quick little tug like I was a fighter jet, look at the rate of turn on this thing. And coming out of that turn like that. That's insane. If I wanted to go ahead and pull myself into the vertical here real quick, go ahead and wait for it to stall right there. We're going to go ahead and push my left foot forward, right aileron, forward, right foot. It's just so easy to fly. It's just gotta go is the best way to describe it. Absolutely incredible. If you are more of a barnstorming kind of a fan here, we can pull ourselves into all sorts of things. And like I said, the rudder on this thing is so responsive. One thing you got to watch out in a descent, though, is obviously your maneuvering speed. We don't have one listed in the manual or anything like that because I don't have the official manual with it, unfortunately. I have the one that came with it. So I can't tell you to do anything, but I'm guessing 100 knots or 100 miles an hour is probably more than enough to do some really serious damage to this thing. So, of course, we can go bustling very, very low and fast kind of a thing. Again, keep my speed about 100 miles per hour. And we can go ripping through the countryside like an idiot kind of a thing. And it's just such an easy plane for that exact purpose. And you can see how we almost went slamming past our red line RPM there. And there we go, about 2100. Nice! So as you can see, from a complete package perspective, it's really, really maneuverable. It's very easy to fly. It, like I said, it's a 2-hour endurance, but very few of us fly in VR for 2 hours. I know there are exceptions to these rules. Of course, people go cross-country in VR and things like that. That's all on you. So one of the things that makes this airplane interesting too, of course, is the landing experience. And the landing of this plane is different. Different. So let's go head over to our airport real fast. Ah, there it is, right off our left there. So one of the things that makes this plane really challenging to land is the fact that it does not like to slow down. I'm right now, if you look at my airspeed, I'm doing 50 knots, 55 knots. And even though I'm under the green, the aircraft will continue to fly, especially if you're not flying with a passenger. And this thing, if you take a look at its weight right now, let's go take a quick gander. Let's see here. Weight, we're about, I don't know, 1,500 pounds. So we are wicked light. It's very, very challenging. So that's our target today. We've got this lovely little airport right below us. And again, look at how easily this airplane turns. So what we're going to do is we're going to get kind of conventional here. We're going to fly ourselves into a good old-fashioned kind of cross wing here. And all we're trying to do is line up for a downwind. We're going to be landing runway 4 today. Again, I look over my back. I got my throttle pulled back about halfway. Like I said, it does not take anything to get this thing down to the ground. And I swear I can see where people didn't always make it. But look at the turn rate on this. It's incredible. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll level this off here. And the big thing here is you've just got to go slow. That's the best way to describe how to get this thing down to the ground. So I'm going to go ahead and bring ourselves downwind. Looks pretty good for you there. A little lower than typical downwind. And the reason I'm doing that is, because this thing does not want to slow down. You'll know exactly what I mean the first time that you try it. So I'm looking out here. We're beaming the numbers. We're going to start our descent. I'm just going to go ahead and back the power up quite substantially. Again, this thing gets quiet pretty darn quick. And I'm just going to hold that nose up. Again, we're trying to stay slow. Once we've done that, of course, we can unlock our slots. You just go click like that, and that's going to unlock them, and it'll give us a little bit of extra kind of stability, especially as we start getting real slow here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my downwind out a little long. The reason I want to do that, again, is just to try to bleed off this altitude before I take my turn. And what we're going to do is, love the visibility on biplanes. It's nothing like anything else that I fly. And we just go ahead and bring ourselves into base here, just like that. And I'm still way too high, but that's okay, because we're going to fix that on the way down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull myself to final, and I'm going to go ahead and stomp my foot to the right. And we're going to go ahead and execute ourselves a nice aggressive slip. There we go. And again, I'm just flying sideways so that I can see the runway, and I keep my speed under control. There we go. That's good. We're just going to come down to the grass. We are conventional. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and let the plane slow down. And as we slow down, I'm going to pull the nose up. That's about 10 degrees right there. That's our landing attitude. And we're just going to wait for the plop. If we get a little bit fast coming down, all we have to do is go ahead and pull back. Once we're on the ground, of course, so we want to use our ailerons as well as our feet aggressively, and we want to be very gentle. If we're going to tap any brakes, we're going to end up basically planting it, so you just have to be very mindful of that. If you're flying with the high ground drag on, you'll have no difficulty getting this thing to slow down. But the key thing is, as you can see, we're about 12 degrees nose up. That is our attitude for landing on this one. Give it a little tiny tap of brakes so when we're good. And of course, don't forget that your spark plugs will start getting kind of unhappy with you, so it'll pop back up to about 900 RPM. So shutting this one down is a little different than some of the aircraft that I've experienced before. When I think of aircraft, of course, slam on the fuel shutoff. But remember, the fuel shutoff is linked to this little valve here. There's a lot of fuel left in the engine. So shutting down is actually a little different. What we do is we shut the two magnetos off. Flight sim's going to yell at us, of course. That's fine. Give it a few moments to kind of cycle itself off. And then when that shuts down, then we pull the fuel valve and actually disengage it. So as you can see, this is a pretty neat plane. For those people who like really, really old school, very, very maneuverable airplanes. This one's definitely top. So cross-country experience is a little hindered because of how difficult this compass is to actually utilize. It does work, but it's just so much easier ways to do it. But we do have a modern GPS as well as an autopilot included in the package. Enjoy.